Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Shanty Show. My name's Stefan, and I've got Richard Cott from Pressgang Mutiny joining me as well. And our guest today is Dean Calin. Dean is a fabulous shanty singer with the group Bounding Main, and he's also the driving force behind the Maritime Music Directory International, which is an online archive and database of shanty bands, shanty events, and a resource well worth checking out. We're going to talk about how Dean got into shanties. We're going to find out what's up with Bounding Main. And of course, we're going to talk about the MMDI as well and what Dean's vision is for all of that. So, Dean, welcome to the Shanty Show.
Hello, Stefan. How are you? Richard, hello. Nice to see you both again.
Great to see you again. Yeah.
So we were just talking before we hit record. We met for the first time in Bidype in Appingedam in the Netherlands. And what year was that?
Way up in the northeast corner of the Netherlands in 2016.
2016. Going back a ways now.
Almost a decade.
Let's go back even further, because we often like to start just by giving people a sense of how you got into this world of shanties. So, Dean, what's your story?
Gosh, I started singing sea shanties at a Renaissance Fair in Chicago. One of the cast members was promoted to an assistant music director, and he was a big fan of Johnny Collins and Tom Lewis. And one of the problems with Renaissance fairs is that they try to bring in music that is both period and entertaining. And period music bores the heck out of everybody. So they experimented with folk music, and you can only sing Waltzing with Bears so many times. And Irish music is pretty identifiable as Irish music and kind of takes the audience away from the Renaissance theme. And it was Rob Middleton's thought that he would bring in sea shanties, because our fair is called the Bristol Renaissance Fair, and it's named after the city of Bristol, which is a port town, as you know. And so sea shanties, even though they were horribly anachronistic, came into use at that Renaissance Fair. And because the Bristol Renaissance Fair was kind of a trendsetter, Renaissance fairs all over the country started singing sea shanties. So now any Renaissance fair you go to in the United States is going to sing sea shanties because of Rob Middleton. In 1998, I believe it was, I was cast as a sea dog. Prior to my singing, I've been a sword fighting actor at these Renaissance fairs. I've been doing that since I was 16 years old. So that's 1976. I don't want to do the math on that, but a long time. And part of our show was not just sword fighting and doing play segments, but we also had a section where we sang sea shanties. And this was all new to us, and I liked it very much. I was introduced to it, of course, by Rob, and I thought I would really like to take this outside of the fair. And I had an opportunity later to put a group together at another smaller show, and the cast that I put together for that, I approached them after the show was over. I said, "Hey, let's do this more outside of the show." And everybody said, "Great. What are these sea shanties?" And so we had 5 other people besides myself join long term. That was 2003 when we got together. So we've been together for 22 years now, and we've performed all over North America and Europe. You folks have done a lot of the same places that we have, and you know what a thrill it is to be able to perform at foreign festivals where you're getting 100,000 people in Pampole and 50,000 people in Falmouth, and it's a rare privilege to be able to keep this music alive and being performed in front of a lot of people, and it's just amazing.
One of the things that I remember we talked about within Pressgang Mutiny after we met you all in the Netherlands, unbelievable, fabulous singers, and you wear costumes.
Heave away, haul away, comes their hair with the codfish bones, and we're bound away for Australia, and it's heave her up, me bully, bully boys, heave away,
Is the costume thing because of the Renaissance Fair angle? Like, is that where that came into being part of what Bounding Main does?
Yeah, what we found is that we did a lot of tall ship events because we're on the Great Lakes. We found that the organizers of the event love the costumes because they consider being able to pose with us a Kodak moment. So every time we got hired, they requested specifically that we wear our costumes. The costumes are Elizabethan mariner costumes. They're
Okay.
16th century costumes. They're the same ones we wear at the Renaissance Fair. And we do still, after all this time, enjoy being able to perform at the same Renaissance Fair. We've worked there every season for 22 years, and it's been so nice not having to run around in the sun in upholstery, swinging swords and hanging off of ropes. It's quite nice.
Yeah. I find this fascinating because so we were talking with Bob Walser on the previous episode, and one of the conversations that we had with him was around, there's an expansive definition of shanties and there's a technical definition of shanties, and people draw those lines in different places, and the world of shanties to most people means anything vaguely salty, any kind of song. It's why we get the likes of the Wellerman and stuff. And so, in the 16th century costumes, that would technically sort of predate the golden age of shanties and when these songs were being used. But it's also a look that I think does give people an immediate access to, okay, I know what these songs are going to be. So it's a very sort of, interesting and blurry line in this whole world of shanties that you've sort of carved out. But what I find interesting about you is, on the one hand, there's that and the performance aspect, and make it accessible and, lean a little bit into some of the misperception. But then you've got this very technical exercise that you're doing to document everything shanty related that we can possibly kind of, put in a database around the events and the performers and the history of it. Tell me about, and for those that listening that don't know it, I'd love if you could tell a little bit about the Maritime Music Directory International, the MMDI, and sort of what led to it and what your goals are for it, because it's a fascinating resource.
Well, I tell you, the absolute reason why I started it was because of the Scottish Postman. The fact that someone with absolutely no street cred could earn £6 million with a song that he cribbed from the Longest Johns kind of concerned me. They were interjecting a lot of misinformation into the public eye that I felt should be amended. And the other thing was, too, that having been on the circuit for a long while, I was aware that there are hundreds of groups that are working very hard to sing authentic maritime music, whether it's sea shanties or ballads about the sea. And of course, you know that there's a big distinction between the two, even though in common use, even our veteran groups call them all shanties, even though they know they're not all shanties. In order to be able to preserve the historicity of the songs, I worked with databases in my day job. So it was kind of a natural extension for me to want to do that for the maritime music. It was something that I thought would be important to be able to say, oh, I went to this festival in 2023 and there was a group there that I really liked. What were they called? Oh, let me go to the Maritime Music Directory. Oh, yeah. Oh, it was Bounding Main. Yeah, that's who it was. And I just felt that there is no country music awards. There's no rock and roll hall of fame for our music. And to me, no one else was doing it. So since I had the time, I started this during COVID. Since I had the time and I had the experience with doing a database, that I would get it going. So I did, and it seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah. And it's an interesting setup. I mean, I have a little visibility behind the scenes, thanks to you. But you've got different editors in different geographies whose role is to add new entries and to source and find new bands. I've been completely derelict in my duties in doing that. with other things on the go. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about how that setup came to be and who the team is?
Absolutely. Well, I've been working most closely with Tony Goodenough. A lot of people will know Tony from the song that he created years ago called Pump Shanty. A lot of people think that Pump Shanty is a traditional song. Nope, Tony wrote it back in the 80s, I believe it was. A lot of people love the song, and it's a good piece. Tony is of a like mind. He had been out of the music scene for a few years and was kind of eager to get back into it. And this was kind of jumping in with both feet for him. So he speaks French. He's quite fluent in it. And he did an amazing job of taking our representation of French groups and festivals from about 10 entries to easily 50 entries. Remarkable work. And of course, since he's in the UK, he's also handling the UK, although I probably did a lot of the UK before he came on board. But I've been able to recruit people from several countries now. I've got Norway, I've got Germany, I've got Canada, I've got me in the US, I've got a couple people in Australia. So having these people in place, I also have a couple of people who are helping me in Poland. Although Camille is writing a book and doesn't have a whole lot of time, he has been a enthusiastic advisor, though. So I think I've got the major hotspots for the maritime music, and everyone is enthusiastic. Everyone wants to do more than they've got time to do, because who doesn't love talking about what they love to do?
Exactly. Well, and here we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like I got to say, it's an incredible resource. We're planning out a tour of the UK next summer, and it was my first stop. Was just right. What festivals? What months? Where's there a good concentration? Which festivals are still going? A few I found. I was like, well, that sounds good. Oh no, hasn't been going since 2017. But yeah, it's a fabulous resource. So thank you for all the hard work you've done on that on behalf of all the guys in our band, but I think for the broader Shanty community too. What a incredible contribution that is.
Absolutely. I have a couple of things that I would like to add to the site that I just have not had the bandwidth for. The obvious one is a living calendar, because it's one thing to have an entry for the festival itself and talk about the festival. Ultimately, the listings that we do for these events and for the bands and the band members are the long-term perspectives. They're not designed to be like Facebook, where they're saying, hey, we've got an event coming up in a week, come on out. We're there talking about Eric Eilert from Bristol, who was performing, 20 years ago, and what he did and what albums he did. In fact, I'm working right now. I've got a Smithsonian CD here, and I'm going through the CD, and I'm picking the names out of the actual sailors that contributed songs, and I'm adding them to the listing because they're contributors to the scene, and nobody knows who they are because nobody's had a directory like this before.
Yeah. Amazing for the scholarship. Maybe we switch gears a little bit, because I do want to talk a little bit more about Bounding Main, and it might be the right time in the conversation to mention that you've been dealing with some health issues that have taken you away from singing and most things, I would imagine, over the last little while. But I was really heartened to see that you had managed to get back to a rehearsal, and you were mentioning before we hit record that you will be heading into the studio for your 6th, maybe 7th, depending on how we count them, record. But yeah, tell us all about that and what Bounding Main's up to these days.
Well, health-wise, we had talked about the fact that folk music in general has an eclipsing population. A lot of us are a little bit older, and a lot of us have had health issues. Mine is, I can say that I'm dealing with multiple myeloma, which is a cancer of the blood marrow, the bone marrow, and the treatment that I'm getting is pushing that back. In the middle of all this, I also had a coronary event, because one crisis is just not enough. So I had a stent put in as well, and I'm going to physical therapy twice a week to try to recover my energy from that event, complicated, of course, by the fact that my ribs had been splitting apart from the inside out. It's kind of daunting. The interesting thing is I spent 3 years developing the Maritime Music Directory kind of glued to my chair and not exercising a lot. So one could say that my diligent work kind of put me here, which is a crazy thing to think about, but I am on the road to recovery. In December, I'm scheduled for a stem cell transplant, which is essentially they're going to be taking stem cells from me, setting them aside, giving me an old school chemo treatment, which is the ones you hear about that pretty much wipe you out, and then they will redeposit my stem cells and let them repopulate throughout my body, and I'll have about excuse me, a month where I'll be down and out, and will have to be pretty much under 24/7 observation so that I remain healthy and recovering. So I felt it was important to talk about this because there's always a stigma in society about talking about health, and I think that that is wrong. I think that enough of us have had problems with not just cancer, but other illnesses, and it's something to be shared. So I wanted to be plain about what my issues were, and to say that most of the people in Bounding, Maine have had some medical experience, curiously enough, and a lot of my friends also have medical backgrounds. So I've been very fortunate that I have all of the right people helping me both with advice and with genuine aid, and it's been a manageable journey with that assistance.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that, and happy that it sounds like it's on a good path. As you were speaking about that, what came to mind to me quite obviously was, we've lost quite a few titans of the shanty world over the last year or so, just off the top of my
Absolutely.
head, right? Heather Wood, Tall 12, my dad passed. I think I'm right in saying John Roberts passed recently. And just two nights ago, one of the members of the Toronto area Morris dancing community, Tom Elmer, who's a listener of this show, passed away as well. And it's one of the great joys of shanties is the intergenerational component of it, but it is also one of those things where, yeah, to your point, a lot of the community is getting to that age where these things are going to happen. And look, goes without saying that thrilled that we're able to have this conversation, and that you're still with us for the foreseeable. It's amazing. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about what's going on with Bounding, Maine, and the plan for the studio. Would love to hear about that.
Yeah, Bounding, Maine, in our 22nd season, unfortunately, I was only able to get to one show at the beginning of the year, and the group continued as a quartet for the rest of the season. Thankfully, everyone is very flexible. John Kravitsky is our music director, and he's been scrambling like a maniac trying to make things work, adjusting parts as he's been able to. He and I double up on the tenor line, which has been something that we've taken advantage of over the years, as John's got a family items that he takes care of throughout the year, and sometimes he has to leave gigs or not attend gigs because of other obligations. So the fact that we double up on the tenor line has been very helpful. Yeah, I have always been the principal to be booking gigs for Bounding, Maine, and I worked very hard to get some very interesting things this year. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do them myself, and depending upon how the stem cell treatments leave me will determine how much I am going to be able to do in 2026. We were supposed to be doing the Pampole Festival, but we backed off of that. Pierre Marvan was kind enough to extend the invitation to us for 2027, and I'm looking forward to being able to go back to that incredible event. Generally speaking, we have been working very hard to learn a bunch of new songs for a new CD. It's been 5 or 6 years since our last release. That was Fish Out of Water. And our fans have been clamoring for new CDs. That's one of the things about performing at a Renaissance festival is that CDs are still hugely popular at Renaissance fairs. And that leaves quite the conundrum that a lot of musicians are always struggling with is, do we print CDs? Because it used to be that 1,000 was the sweet spot. That was the number that you could print and get good quality of both the CD itself and the artwork on the jacket. But to print 1,000 now seems just crazy because we have a closet full of CDs from previous ones, and now we find that there's an interesting sine wave of CD sales going down and digital sales going up. So we sell a lot on Bandcamp, and we've sold a lot digitally on Amazon and other portals. So yeah, we're still struggling with how much of what to print.
Yeah, we did a short run of the physical CDs. We will need to do a few more, but the one that is the killer has been the vinyl. The prices on that. We're doing a double album, double disc. Yeah, and it's a lot more expensive than we thought it was gonna be.
Plus the literal gravity of dragging around vinyl to shows. I was just listening to a podcast about a DJ in his early years in New York. He was talking about hauling vinyl discs to his gigs, and now everything's on a jump drive with a laptop, and life is so much better. But he was bemoaning the fact that there's a certain magic to vinyl, and it's like, man, I'll take the jump drive myself.
Fair enough. So you mentioned pen pal, and I wonder, you've been doing this now for, I think you said 22 years with Bounding Main, and you've toured internationally regularly. Are there any highlights or any festivals that you just think, if you're an up and coming shanty band, or if you're a big shanty fan, these are the ones you got to check it out at least once in your life? Like, I would put pen pal on that list for me, right?
Absolutely. Pample is certainly very close to the top. The festival that really surprised me was Shanties in Krakow. I was very impressed with how cosmopolitan Krakow was. In all of our travels, I'm so pleased and a little bit amazed that I realized that I'm driving 100 miles an hour on the Autobahn at 2:00 in the morning with a 9-person van, thinking, how the hell did I get here? And you're just so fortunate to be in all of these foreign circumstances. And you find yourself at Festival Maritime, where there are so many bands on so many stages, and the German audience is so very different from the audience anywhere else. They're very polite and guarded, and they won't applaud between songs, but they will applaud afterwards. And then they'll come up to you and they'll touch you all over and talk to you and moin moin. It's just absolutely marvelous. I would say, in terms of the top festivals to hit, and no offense to any festival that I don't mention, but I would say that Falmouth is absolutely, particularly for an English-speaking band, Falmouth is an absolute one to hit. Their maritime tradition is so rich of itself, and you just look at photos or videos of the show, and the audience is packed, shoulder to shoulder, and everyone's so enthusiastic. So Falmouth, B-Dype has been so welcoming to us for so long. It was the second international festival for us to do, and the Netherlands are so amazing to go to. It's so very different from anything that we have domestically.
It's a very, very special little corner of the Netherlands as well. I think even in speaking with some Dutch friends myself, they kind of ask, like, where up there? Like, it's a funny little place. It's a magical little place up in the north. And I agree. I think that Appingedam is a wonderful, wonderful festival.
Have you folks done the Leerlied Festival in Workum?
No, we haven't done that.
That one is organized by, my gosh, I'm having a moment.
We're gonna have to go to the MMDI.
um, oh, shoot. I am going to go to the MMDI.
I think someone built that thing.
There we go. Learly Maritime Festival, Strant Race, Nani and Anki. There we go.
Strant Race, also the name of Jim McGeehan and Johnny Collins.
Well, do you know what the Strant Race is?
No.
Marvelous. The Strant Race, you'll be able to edit this later, literally translates to shit race. Up in Friesland, where that city is located, they raise sheep, and sheep make shit. And the tulips are all sold and grown in the south. So they haul this shit on these boats, and the boats have a race from Friesland down to Amsterdam, and the first one to get there wins a prize. So the Strant Race literally is getting the fertilizer down to Amsterdam, and the participants in the audience get to drag ropes to pull the boats down the canal to get out to the IJsselmeer so that they can race down to Amsterdam. It's amazing. Yeah, it's always paired with the Leerlied Festival run by Nani and Anki.
So those happen at the same time.
Yeah, the Strand Race is like the day after. And Leerlied has a cachet about it because it, for over 21 years, was the home festival for Johnny Collins and Jim McGeehan. And all of the things that they represent to the genre over the years. Then also, everyone wants to go to the festival. Is it in Sweden or Norway?
We're just doing a product demo.
Yeah, I'm on MMDI too. It's Sudden Squall in Norway, and then Pavillon Noir in Sudden Squall in Sweden, and then Pavillon Noir in Norway.
Yeah, that's under Musical X. We need to be looking under venues. Very interesting. So there's a festival in the Nordic countries that everyone tells me is impossible to get into. But I want to get in there because it's on my bucket list. Likewise, I haven't done a festival in Ireland, and I would love for us to get to Ireland because I've got the Dalby twins in my group, and they would love to do something in their home country. So we talked about, let's see, a Festival Maritime, Shanties in Krakow, Falmouth. Who else is another notable one? Well, there are a lot of festivals in Poland that we have not been exposed to. We keep getting invited by members of Banana Boat to attend these, but of all of the languages, Polish is the hardest one for me to comprehend.
It's a very difficult language, but I'll tell you, when you're there singing, we didn't do Kraków, but we did Tychy, which is another festival. And when you're there singing to them shanties in English, and they're roaring back at you, all of them, the entire bar, the same shanty in Polish.
Marvelous.
It's quite the experience. Yeah.
For a long time, we had in Chicago, the Chicago Maritime Festival, and in its first year, it was run by a Polish group, and it was eventually taken over by Tom and Chris Castle and a couple of other people, Bill Strauss, and they ran it for 14 years. We thought initially, though, that it was going to be basically a Polish festival, and it would have been interesting had it worked out that way because it adds such a very different element. Have you ever had it explained to you why shanties are so big in Poland?
Yeah, we actually sat down with Marek Szwarowski and spoke to him about it when we were there. But I think it bears repeating. But he was one of the two journalists who had the radio program that sort of popularized shanties within Poland. So yeah, he gave us a good sort of rounded story around that in one of our earlier episodes.
Actually, I'd like to hear what he told you.
So there were two of them, Marek and another gentleman whose name I don't have. I'll have to go back and look at that episode. And one of them was working here, and one of them was traveling with a merchant marine and had a connection to a guy in the UK who would set aside records because he knew that that Marek and his colleague were interested in these things, and they had a radio program that aired nationally. And the conceit behind the radio program was one of them was the captain, and one of them was the first mate, and they would go on this voyage around the world and tell stories about it and play the music as they went. And then that, he said, just started to, trickle into getting organized events, and people were passing around cassette tapes and this type of stuff. And that became sort of the genesis of the scene. So we spoke to him like literally out front of a performance arts center that was showcasing some of the performances from the festival. And he was just saying he, couldn't believe how huge this whole scene had grown, and now there were festivals throughout the country, small ones, tiny little things and sessions, and then just massive like Krakow. I don't know if that aligns at all with
It does. The thing to keep in mind is that when the genesis of these festivals started happening, it was while the communists controlled Poland. And so Shanties, I think, had a kind of an underground cachet that this was all part of the resistance. And I think that there was a mental association between sea shanties and freedom.
There was. I think that there's this really interesting characterization that that Marek made, that shanties in Poland were romanticized, where you'd often hear in the shanty canon a lot of complaining about the work, about the captain, about your lot in life, whereas in Poland this was glorified. The life depicted in the shanty was glorified, as it was, to your point. It was this kind of symbol of an outside world, and a symbol that also stood for freedom. So
yeah, I think it's remarkable to me. I think we had a cab driver at one point say that anywhere you go in Poland, everyone knows what a sea shanty is. Not everyone likes them as much as others, but everyone knows what a sea shanty is. And it's crazy. One of my long-term projects is to actually write an article for a magazine to talk about the shanty scene, to further spread the gospel about this genre of music, because while there was a popularity of pseudo shanties during COVID, I think that people still to this day don't appreciate what a powerful genre of music it still is. It represents an expansion, perhaps not always a good one, but it does represent a way of life that led Western civilization to where it is today, good or bad. And European countries that are all still on the ocean have not forgotten that, as much as we in America have largely forgotten it. Our East Coasts, West Coast, and Great Lakes areas still have a lot of representation for the music, but within the central states or provinces, I think that someone in Manitoba isn't going to know a sea shanty from a tractor.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because this came up a little bit when we were talking with Bob Walser as well. There's a way of looking at shanties that becomes quite Eurocentric, right? Or sort of a UK centric view, and that's probably the one that most people kind of come in and find shanties through, and that makes sense, tied into the folk revival. These are good songs for singing in pubs. They have a good structure for, big social singing. So it makes sense that they would kind of be wrapped up in that. But that a lot of the roots of these songs were more likely to have been Afro-Caribbean, African-American, even West African. And that then starts to create links between the shanty form and other musical forms, or at least that's an interesting thing to look at. And that's what we tried to do a little bit with the new album. But things like, if it's, call and response and improvisational, well, that puts you in mind of hip hop. You have blues artists like, Leadbelly, even Joplin, right? Like, they sang shanties, and it was all kind of part and parcel and mixed up with that same thing. So I think that you're right in that, like, somebody in Manitoba wouldn't necessarily, resonate with a shanty because it's a shanty. But I think there's a lot in that would still be musically relevant and interesting, because I think it is a tradition that has connections to other art forms that are maybe, a bit more vibrant and popular today. One of the things that I was quite heartened by, because we see it here, is the rise in these shanty sings, right? There's the long-standing ones like at the Griswold or in New York at South Street. But, Bob was saying there was one in Minneapolis that's just taken off like a rocket.
Yep.
Our friends in My Town Sea Shanty Collective in Ottawa have a great scene. There are 2 shanty sings in Toronto now. I think that this is a musical form that can still be very, very relevant.
I think the popularity of the shanty sings is so important. And I should mention that we added a filter to the Maritime Music Directory that you can first sort by category for the sing-outs, and then you can sort by country. You can also you can do a search by city or state and get fairly tightly focused on where these events are. But even if you just search by category, there simply aren't so many you couldn't sort through them. But I get requests weekly for shanty sings, and I love that. We have a long running shanty sing in Chicago. There's another one that's been going on in Milwaukee. That was founded by Sarah Warren, who learned her trade at college in Boston. So I love the fact that someone besides David Drake or I organized it. That means the world to me, because the fact that there's enough popularity from other quarters, that's very exciting to me. By the way, Bob Walser, what a great guy, and what a font of information. His scholarly information is so overwhelming, and he's such a good entertainer. We were fortunate enough to be able to perform with him at the Chicago Maritime Festival. He's one of about 14 maritime themed musicians in the Great Lakes region that I always refer to whenever I talk about sea shanties or maritime music in general.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great conversation. And if anyone's watching or listening to this and wants to check that out, you can find the episode immediately previous to this.
What's interesting to me is that today we've just discussed the African-American roots of maritime music, yet today there are only 2 Black groups anywhere. There's the Menhaden Shantymen and the Bearly Whalers, and that's it.
Well, and the Bearly Whalers, Tull 12 passed away in March, who was the last guy who actually, did these songs while working. Vince Reed and Dan Lanier are carrying on with the project, and I know they're trying to interest the townspeople of Bearly in the tradition there, so that it doesn't die out with the passing of the last real shanty man.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic that you had the opportunity to do an interview with them.
Yeah, and we got to spend some time down there. It's a little bit the bane of our existence that we can't get this documentary released properly due to some technical issues with a hard drive that's stuck in St. Vincent, but we will figure out a way to get it out there. But what an honor to get to spend time hanging out, learning and singing with Tull 12, and having, getting to see the town of Bearly through his eyes was pretty cool.
Very, very different lifestyle. So Tony Goodenough and I were talking about the fact that there was such a deficiency in a Black voice in this music scene. And I thought, man, if there were a quartet put together, they would be a huge hit at these international festivals, because there is an absolute absence of that demographic. And I thought to myself, how do I find a local choir from which I could get 4 young men who would be willing to sing something historic? And it's like, oh man, I've got so many projects already. I don't know that I'm ready to start a new group, but man, I would sure do what I could to inculcate interest in a group like that, because like I said, I think that it would be hugely popular, and it would be very educational if someone was able to do a little digging into the roots, because even Shanties from the Seven Seas, Stan Hugel, I've got 3 copies here, and he cites a lot of early examples that could be drawn from immediately without a great deal more research. And I'm sure that there are sources that are available that I have not been exposed to draw more songs from. But
Yeah.
that just seems so interesting to me, and I don't know what I could do by myself, but I would sure love to see that manifest somehow.
It has been an excellent conversation. I spent some time rolling through the MMDI, and I think the one thing that I was most impressed by is the truly international angle and the way that you've been able to bring so many global collaborators around this database to, spread the good word, as you said, right? To evangelize, to create this database of events and of groups. So just going through it and seeing everyone from, the places that have welcomed us and your group, Netherlands and France and Germany and the UK and so on. Certainly something to be a lasting artifact in our little corner of the musical world.
Dean, how can people find your music and find out more about Bounding Main?
Well, Bounding Main can be found at boundingmain.com. The word bounding and the word main, M-A-I-N, there's no E. You can also look us up in the Maritime Music Directory. We're based in Chicago. Again, have 5 albums available on Bandcamp. We're also on Spotify, and I think you probably can still find us on Amazon and several other of the music portals that are out there. In terms of the MMDI, it's Sea Shanties, the number 4 all.com, seashantiesforall.com. And that's an interesting, I had a different URL secured, but the company was in Ukraine. And as I secured the URL, Ukraine was attacked. So I was unable to get a hold of them to manage the ownership of the URL. So I had to, at the last minute, run around and create a completely different URL. And instead of something sensible, I panicked and said, Sea Shanties for all. Yeah, that'll do it.
I think it works. What was the original URL that the Russians took from us?
I think it was Maritime Music Directory.
This one's got a little bit more pizzazz, I'd say.
Yeah, I thought, let's thrill the kids.
That's awesome. And I assume if there's any, massively wealthy benefactors out there who'd, cared to make a large donation to the MMDI, that, you'll welcome all comers.
Absolutely. There is a contribution tab at the top of the page. We don't chase after people for contributions, but the fact is the MMDI is a not-for-profit here in the States that gets you a tax deduction outside of the United States. Why, that's just a good attaboy. Thank you for supporting the arts and supporting maritime music all over the world.
Yeah, so go check that out and make a contribution. It's a fantastic resource and a ton of work that you've piled into it to make that available. So yeah, once again, like Dean, thank you for everything. I'm glad to see that you're looking so well and up and about a little bit. Of course, we're thinking about you a lot, and I know we'll be in touch. But I really, really appreciate you making the time for this conversation. We were looking forward to it for a long time, so I'm really glad we finally got it done.
Yeah, thank you both so much for having me.
Thanks everyone for watching and listening. Give this a like, give it a subscribe. Head over to the MMDI. Check out Bounding Main wherever you can find them, and we'll be back in a month's time with Melanie Ross.